Anton Guinea is a gentleman that's been on our show before. He's talking about workplace accident and injury, and there's another kind that has been prominent in discussion for a fair while, and that's sexual harassment, and that happens in the workplaces, and that also causes injury and grief and harm. Different kind, but still the same. To talk about it, Anton, welcome back to the show.
Robert, always a pleasure, mate. I really enjoy our chats, and good to see Geelong's got some decent weather even in winter.
Yeah, it's not too bad. Look, it's beautiful out there today. If you're just put a coat on because it's a bit chilly, but the sun is streaming down. It is just gorgeous. But we know it's going to get a little bit wet, but just hang on. Next Tuesday, it's going to be beautiful again. Anton, we have had a real change of social discussion. It goes all the way back to the appointment of Grace Tame as Australian of the Year. It was quickly followed by a very brave Brittany Higgins standing up on a pedestal and saying, this wasn't right what happened to me, and I need to tell my story. And we've had a lot more come out since. But tucked away in workplaces, this sort of stuff has been going on for a very, very long time. Not enough, well, I suppose, the courage to bring it out, but also the horrible part is how so much of it's been hidden away from public view. But of course it is a natural workplace thing where your field comes into play.
Absolutely, Robert, and thanks for sharing, and thanks for being part of the conversation, sharing with your listeners just how important a topic this is. And some research now tells us that 1 in 6 people, that's the hugest number, 1 in 6 people have experienced sexual harassment in the workplace. Now, it's not just confined to males to females. Like, there are some senior female leaders that sexually harass males or potentially other females. And we are so, as a society, we're so scared about this topic for some reason, and that's why I put it out to the media to let's talk about this. Let's continue the narrative that Brittany Higgins has started and that Tarana Burns started with the Me Too movement back in 2006, where her go was to actually use social media. Before we really knew what social media was, it was MySpace back then, to make public when people use generally a power position, so usually it's the power of authority, to sexually harass. And how do they do that? Whether it's perving, whether it's, I've heard reports in my line of work about people asking, others about their sex life, and really intimate personal questions that are just probably really demeaning and really inappropriate for the workplace. And what leaders don't realise is the impact that this has on other humans, and they're psychologically scarred. Because I talk about physical safety a lot, and I also talk about psychological safety and not hurting people's emotional state, as well as their physical state. And people's emotional state is so important, and one of the easiest ways to hurt people's emotional state, and sometimes chronically, and what I mean by chronically is for the long term, is to sexually harass someone. And it's just inappropriate. And let's continue the dialogue, and let's make sure we make this more public, and make sure we bring it to the fore and let people know that it is inappropriate, that we're not going to stand for it anymore, and that we care about humans enough in our workplaces that we're going to do something about it.
There's so many different levels, Anton, and I go back to maybe just the lunchroom in a factory environment where there's 10% of the staff are female, and the blokes are blokey, and they claim it's joking. In some cases, it might just be that. Certainly, when they caught out, it magically becomes, I was only joking. But the ones that really do concern me, and the ones that I think cause more physical damage, is when you get into those positions of power you're talking about, where someone then, and I guess the Harvey Weinsteins of the world, that's almost blackmail. If you want this, I can give it to you, but I need this in return. That sort of situation must put some males and females in particularly vulnerable situation, and I guess it's the preying on the vulnerability that is the root problem.
Absolutely, and once it goes to that level, obviously it's more than psychological abuse, it's more than sexual harassment. That is that is really becomes physical, and then it becomes physical abuse, believe it or not, as we can, even though you might have a half-willing victim. If you're bribing, if you're blackmailing, if you're doing something like that, in the case you're talking about, obviously inappropriate, and let's hope and pray that people like that are found out and held to account for the damage that they've done to other humans. And I love what you talked about, the factory and those sorts of things. And some people will say, well, hold on a second, isn't PC going too far? Can't we talk about fun things in a crib room? Well, I believe, this is my philosophy on this, and it's that I don't think PC's gone too far, because if we hurt other humans, if we have an impact on people where they walk away feeling violated, where they walk away feeling as though we've overstepped the mark, that's uncool. And I believe that we all have a responsibility as people, as humans, to actually not have that impact on others, whether it's a Harvey Weinstein using bribery and corruption and the promise of something in return for a sexual act, for example. And I really hope that leaders understand the power or the opportunity that they have to make people feel good about themselves, and choose their words carefully enough so that they don't have that negative impact on people. So, in the sexual harassment case, that people don't go away from work having to be counselled or having to be dealing with the impact of conversations from leaders, or even physical touch. You've got to be so careful these days, Robert. Just, physical touch is a big issue, and COVID's brought that out even further. So as humans, we've just got to be a little bit more careful these days, and I'm okay with it. I really am, because I want people to feel better about themselves when they come into contact with me, and I want them to feel better. I want everyone to have the skill set and have the emotional control and have the verbal control to actually, to be able to have conversations that don't have to involve sex at work.
I think it's very important to learn from personal experiences, and my favourite saying is perception is reality, and it's all very well to say, well, it's okay with me, I'm comfortable with it, but it's the perception that others take of that is the reality that you're dealing with. And I had a wonderful example as a sports coach back in the 1980s. I was very much a touchy-feely, pat on the back, ruffle the hair, well done, young fellow. And someone pointed out to me one day, you need to be careful in that space because you are invading that person's space. And I also had a situation where a young fellow actually turned away from me when I went to put my arm around him to congratulate him on something. And those two things really resonated with me and have completely changed the way I interact in that space. But I'm not sure that enough people actually take the lesson when it comes.
Well said, Robert. And the reason that you've taken that learning is because you're actually an emotionally intelligent human. That's why you do the work that you do. You know what's important to people, and you know the impact, and you understand, you emotionally get through your emotional system how you are perceived, how you are perceived is the best word by other humans. And when you know deep down your heart of hearts that you've had an impact on someone where they've had to pull away from you, and you can learn from that and change your behaviour, that is, that's growth, personal development 101. When your behaviour changes based on the experience you've had, because you know that you've had an impact on someone that you didn't want to have, even though you think it's okay. And I'm like you, Robert. I'm a very, and I've learnt the hard way because I'm a public speaker, and I get around the room and I can feel it now, and I never could in the early days, this personal space thing. Like when I'm standing next to someone and they're cringing because we're all different as humans. They've got this personal space thing going on, and I stand too close to them, and they're so uncomfortable, and the energy is contagious. Then other people around them get uncomfortable, and I'm just so now aware of how even just, being near someone can impact them, because our energy field is actually... I know this is a bit woo now, but we've got a 9-metre energy field that goes with us everywhere we go. So we have the ability, even without talking to people, to help them feel good about themselves based on the way that we feel about ourselves as well. So that's probably a bit deep when it comes to sexual harassment. But at the end of the day, when that story that you just talked about, imagine if every leader, and I'm in the middle of a 2-day leadership program right now, would you believe? Right now we're doing leadership training. on how to not be the person that hurts other people. We've just done a session literally on your worst leadership experience. Who's the leader that hurt you the most? And what I say to this group, particularly today, is don't be the leader that people remember in the wrong way.
Yeah.
And sexual harassment.
We have a lot of instinctive behaviours, and let's go all the way back to the smoko environment, and I'm only joking, I'm just having a bit of fun.
Yeah.
Do you sense that public debate, the social conversation that we're having at the moment, which was triggered, well, it started with Me Too, but I think in Australia it really hit home.
Yep.
Grace Tame and Brittany Higgins have really opened the door to this discussion. Do you think that people are getting it more now and realising that their idea of a joke isn't necessarily the universal idea of a joke?
Whether we're getting it or not, let's say, do we think they are? Let's say, let's hope they are. Let's hope and pray that people everywhere are saying, hey, this behaviour is unacceptable, this behaviour is inappropriate. Looking at Brittany Higgins and seeing the impact that this sort of stuff can have on other people. And I just applaud people like you for bringing it out into the public, because this is the problem, Robert. No one is game to talk about this topic. Seriously. I bring it up in leadership workshops. I bring it up in training and coaching, and as soon as I use those two words, sexual harassment, the whole room goes quiet. It's like mental health used to be 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It's like diversity used to be before we grappled with it as a society. We're now starting the journey of a narrative around sexual harassment that this country hasn't yet seen. And let's thank Brittany Higgins, who went through a hell of an experience. And
is still going through it, sadly.
And can I tell you what? We'll probably go through it for many, 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 many years yet. And isn't that sad, Robert, that one incident, where in psychology we call it a chronic effect, and what chronic means is lifelong or very long term. And that's what people don't realise. If you don't choose your words carefully, or if you touch someone inappropriately, or if you ask them questions that are sexual, have sexual innuendos, they can have a long-term impact. They really can. And has it changed in society? I hope it has, mate, seriously.
Yeah.
I hope more women come forward, more men come forward and tell us about what's happened to them so that we can learn from it.
Some concerns I have is strong men and strong women who have all claimed they've had experience, and the best way to deal with it is to just harden up and not worry about it. That concerns me greatly as well, because that's pushing back in the other direction, because that, to me, is taking away the courage that's required to report circumstances. Do you see that as a bit of an issue?
I do, and I see that as more of an excuse, and I'll tell you why. It makes the behaviour okay, and it just puts it back onto the victim. Here's the biggest challenge that we're finding through research now, Robert, is that, let's say, for example, Brittany Higgins comes forward. Well, let's take it out of Brittany Higgins, because we know a lot about that. Let's say someone in a little business somewhere comes forward and says, I've been sexually harassed. And so we get an investigator in, or the HR department, for example, if someone comes in. There's this thing now called network silence. So you imagine going to a co-worker and saying, hey, I'm just wondering if, this person over here has reported sexual harassment. Can you tell us about your experience? No, I haven't seen anything. No, it's never happened to me. No. Go to the next co-worker. What have you seen? No, it hasn't happened to me either. And then you go to the leader. No, I was only joking. And I love that word, I was only joking, because it comes up quite regularly. People aren't even game to even talk about the fact that it could have happened in this particular organisation that we're now talking about, this hypothetical situation that we're talking about. Network silence, what that means is that no one will actually say, hey, it is a problem in our workplace. That's one of the reasons that it can't get addressed, because people at all levels, you imagine, because now we've got to talk about our CEO or our manager,
that's
our
right,
supervisor. And hold on a second, that might impact our career, or it might bring down the wrath of the organisation on us, or it might go on our HR file. And that's one of the biggest challenges that research is telling us now that we've got around sexual harassment is it's a concept, network silence, where people will not, one, they won't report it, and two, the organisation won't admit it and then it can't get investigated, then it can't get stomped out.
Yeah, and I think we've had, I was talking to someone last night about this, that in school situations, how there's a lot of cases come back against the school, and let's go to the churches as well, where institutions clearly hid examples, and the examples kept mounting up, and then courageous people came out, and then you go back through all this historical stuff that comes out to show that that organisation has been aware of the issue for many, many years and chose not to hit it on the head when it first started.
Well said, and that's a perfect example of network silence. People hiding it and people not being willing to take responsibility from an organisational perspective to say this is not acceptable. And you know what? We talk a lot in psychology, Robert, about sexual harassment being a bit like bullying, which it is. It's a form of bullying. And so imagine back in the playground, bullies, there's always a bystander. There's always someone that looks in at a lot of the times there's a bystander. There's a lot of research being done now just about the power of the bystander to actually help the victim address this. And again, that comes back to the ability, the willingness, the confidence of someone to pull on the conversation with someone else in their organisation to say, hey, we need to do something about this. This can't stop. Your behaviour is inappropriate. This is the way that it makes people feel.
Yeah. Anton, quick 20-second answer to this question. Are we getting better in this space?
Slowly. Very slowly. Heaps of work to do. The more that it's publicised, the more that people like you talk about it, the better we will get. There's still too much pushback and there's still not enough discussion about it, I believe, Robert.
Well, we're going to have that. We're going to have lots of it, because that's one of my two pet hates at the moment, the lack of accountability and responsibility of politicians, and the treatment of women and vulnerable men in workplaces and other parts of society. So more to do in this space. Thank you, my friend, for being on. Look forward to our next chat. Hopefully it's something a little bit brighter and breezier, or we'll come back to this space and do it again.
Let's do it again. Hey, thanks, Robert. Thanks for having me, mate, as always.
Good on you. All the best. Anton.